The crate moved. Just a little, but enough for Cale to stop walking and stare at it. He was a human trader, used to picking up broken machine parts, food packs, or scrap tools. But this crate, long, heavy, and marked property of House Draven, wasn't. Supposed to move? He checked the order form again. It said non-living cargo. So why did he hear something soft, like breathing, coming from inside? Cale looked around the dusty landing bay. It was late evening, and most other traders had left. Only one old maintenance droid swept the floor in slow circles. The air smelled of oil and burnt wires. Then the crate moved again, this time a soft knock, tap, tap, tap came from inside. Cale frowned, reached into his tool belt, and pulled out a scanner. He aimed it at the crate. No energy readings, no explosives. But a faint heat signatures, small and close together. He leaned in. Is someone in there? No answer. He touched the lock pad and typed in a universal override code. With a hiss, the crate unlocked and the lid slowly slid open. Inside, curled up on the metal floor, were two figures. A woman, clearly alien blue skin, thin limbs, silver hair falling over her face. Her arms were wrapped tightly around a small child, also blue-skinned, who looked no older than 5. The child opened her big glowing eyes and stared at. Cale's chest tightened. What the hell? The woman stirred. Her voice was dry and weak. Please don't take her away. Cale looked around again. No one had seen this. He could close the crate and walk away. Sell it back to the Draven Guild like everyone else would.
Oh, no questions.
No risk. But he couldn't look away from the child's face. She wasn't afraid. She just looked tired, cold, and holding something in her tiny hand, a piece of cloth. Maybe a blanket, dirty and torn. Cale knelt beside the crate. You need help? The woman looked up at him slowly, then nodded once. Cale sighed. All right. Come on. He helped them both out. The woman could barely stand. The child clung to his leg silently. Her small fingers wrapped around his pants like they never wanted to let go. Cale guided them to his cargo hauler. It wasn't much, just a rusty transport with one bedroom and a fold-out kitchen. He placed them on the couch and gave them water. The woman sipped slowly. The child didn't drink. She just stared at Cale as if studying his soul. What's your name? He asked. The woman answered in a whisper, Soraya. Her name is Leary. Cale nodded. I'm Cale. I'm not going to hurt you. Soraya closed her eyes and leaned back, exhausted. Leary moved closer to her mother, but kept one eye on Cale. Cale sat in the corner, trying to think. What had he just stepped into? Alien widows and children didn't end up in crates by accident. Someone had locked them in there, maybe to sell them, maybe worse. He got up and checked the crate again. Inside, under a loose panel, he found a small ID chip and a burned data disk. No details, it's just the House Draven seal. Back in the hauler. He watched Soraya and Leary sleep, curled together like two birds hiding from a storm. He covered them with his own jacket. The next morning, his cums buzzed. It was a voice he knew. Esoric, another trader. Cale, you picked up that Draven crate, right? Whatever's in there, sell it fast. Word is, they're coming to check it. Who? Cale asked. The guild, and they don't like questions. Cale looked back at the sleeping pair. I'll figure it out, he said, ending the call. That day, he didn't open his stall. Stayed in the hauler, watching the door, cleaning his tools, thinking hard. Soraya woke up around noon. She said nothing, but nodded her thanks when he gave her food. Leary finally whispered one word. Warm. Cale smiled, just a little. That night, he sat near them and asked, Why were you in that crate? Soraya didn't answer, but her hand reached for Leary, held her close. Her eyes said enough. She was running, hiding, and someone wanted them gone. Cale didn't know who, or why, but he knew one thing: he wasn't going to let anyone take them again. Asterisk. Cale woke up with a sharp pain in his side. He looked down and saw a small blue hand clinging to his belt. It was the child Leary, curled beside him on the cold floor. She had slipped down from the couch during the night and was now sleeping with her tiny fingers gripping his waist like he was her anchor. Cale didn't move. Across the room, Shreya sat in silence. She hadn't slept. She was leaning against the wall, knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped around herself. Her silver hair looked like moonlight in the dim light. Her eyes were open, watching him, not with fear, but with something else. A quiet message. Her eyes said, "Thank you." Cale slowly reached down and moved Leary back onto the couch. She didn't wake. Just murmured something in a language he didn't know and turned over, hugging his old jacket like a blanket. "You could." "Have run," Cale said to Soraya, his voice low. "Last night, left the door unlocked." Soraya looked down. "Where would I go?" Cale didn't have an answer. He made some food, simple ration packs and water. He placed a plate near Soraya. She didn't touch it at first. But when Leary sat up and blinked sleepily, Soraya fed her first before taking a single bite herself. She was still cautious. But Cale could see it now. She was more than a scared woman. She was a mother, quiet fighter. Later that day, Cale connected. His comes to the old database system he'd salvaged. He wanted to know more. He searched house-driven records, refugee logs, bounty lists. And after hours of digging, he found a name. Soraya Leva, widow of the late Commander Varric of the Datari Resistance. It's marked as missing. Wanted by Dreven for property theft. No bounty on her. No legal case. No, just a silent warning. Recover at all costs. Cale leaned back in his chair. They think she's property. He stared at the sleeping pair. Leary had one hand resting on her mother's chest like a lock. Soraya had her other hand covering Leary's back, protective even in sleep. He stood and walked outside into the dusty air. He didn't see Zorik's ship anymore. The docks were emptier now, but he did notice something strange, a tall man in dark armor, standing across the plaza, watching his ship. Cale didn't wave. He just stared back. The armored man turned and walked away. That night, Soraya spoke first. "You shouldn't keep us here. You'll get hurt." Cale didn't answer at once. He cleaned a broken wrench, then tossed it in the scrap box. "I didn't ask for this," he finally said, "but here we are." She lowered her eyes. "It's welcome, I know." "Why? Are you helping us?" Cale didn't know. Maybe it was the way Leary clung to him without fear. Maybe it was the way Soraya never begged, never cried, just held on to her daughter and survived. Or maybe he was just tired of pretending. The universe was someone else's problem. "I don't sell people," he said simply. "I don't. Let children sleep in boxes." Soraya's lips parted slightly. It's not a smile, not yet, but the beginning of one. Then Leary did something unexpected. She walked to Cale, climbed into his lap, and rested her head on his chest. Cale froze. Soraya stood, halfway alarmed. But Cale just placed a gentle hand on Leary's back. "She's warm," Leary said softly. "You're warm." Cale didn't know what to say. He just nodded and looked up at Soraya. "I don't know what I'm doing," he said honestly. "I believe you," she whispered. Outside the night was quiet, but the silence felt wrong. Cale checked his outer sensors. There was a signal ping brief, then gone. "They're scanning," he said. Soraya stood beside him now. She wasn't hiding anymore. Her posture had changed. Her shoulders were straight, her eyes sharp. "You'll need to teach me your machines," she said. "I'll protect Leary if they come. You know how to fight." "I know how to survive." Cale looked at her early. Looked. She wasn't broken. She was sharp, hidden steel under soft robes. He had the scars of someone who had seen death and lived. That night, Cale didn't lock the doors, and Soraya didn't sleep with one eye open. They were still strangers. The fear between them had faded, replaced by something new. Trust, not spoken, not signed, just shown in small ways. A hand reaching, a child sleeping, a mother not running, and a human who refused to look away. The little girl woke up screaming. Cale ran from the cockpit to the back of the hauler. He found Leary curled under the table, eyes wide, tears running down her face. Her tiny hands were shaking, pointing toward the ceiling. "What is it?" asked gently, kneeling beside her. She whispered one word, "Hunters." Kale's blood ran cold. Soraya was already there, wrapping Leary in her arms. Hush. She looked at Kale, her voice calm but sharp. She saw something in her sleep. A warning. Didn't believe in visions. But he believed in fear, the kind of fear that came from memories, not stories. Leary's face was too pale, too honest. Kale checked his long-range scanner. A new signal blinked red on the edge of the system. One ship? No ID code. But it moved like a predator, silent, fast, and too slow to be trading. They're coming, he muttered. Soraya closed her eyes and held her daughter close. They always come. Kale activated the ship's cloaking net, a cheap hack he'd rigged from scrap. It would hide the hauler for a few hours, but not forever. He needed a plan. He started fortifying the ship. He welded scrap metal over the main hatch, rerouted the emergency power to create a manual shield wall, and locked down the fuel cell in case they needed to run. Soraya watched him work. You've done this before, she said. I fixed broken. Things are we broken? She asked. Kale looked at her. The first time she wasn't wrapped in silence. Her silver hair was tied back, and her long fingers held tools like she knew how to use them. No, he said, just hunted. Later, as Leary slept again, Soraya helped him lay traps around the camp, small sonic mines, hidden in broken crates. Motion triggers near the cargo bay, even a magnetic pulse tripwire. You're not afraid? Kale asked. I was, she said, setting the wire. But fear keeps you quiet. I have to be loud now. Kale realized she was changing. No longer the silent, scared widow. There was fire in her again. That night they sat together outside the ship, under the stars. Leary curled beside them, asleep again, but holding Soraya's hand tightly. Kale asked softly, What happened to your husband? Soraya didn't look away. He was sold. Kale blinked. Sold. He fought for our people. When we lost, they took him and offered to trade. They said if he confessed to being a rebel, they'd let me and Leary live. He did it. They lied. Kale clenched his jaw. I'm sorry. Soraya nodded. So now I run. Not because I fear them, but because she deserves a life. Kale didn't speak. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden ring. He handed it to her. What is this? She asked. From Earth. My father carved it when I was young. It means family. Soraya looked down at it, family. Suddenly the scanner beeped. Kale jumped up and checked the display. The ship was close to close now. It had stopped above the ridge, just out of sight. A small drone detached and began scanning the surface. They're here, Kale said. Soraya stood. Her face was calm, but her body was ready. Kale activated the outer traps. We'll lead them through the junk trail, slow them down. What if they reach the hauler, then I fight? No, she said firmly. We fight. The drone came closer. Kale grabbed his old plasma cutter, no, good as a weapon, but it could blind sensors. Soraya handed him a broken mirror panel. Aim it at the drone, I'll throw the flare. They worked together quickly. The drone passed overhead. Now the flare burst. Kale reflected it with the mirror. The drone's scanner glitched, flashing wildly before crashing into a rock. Good shot, Kale said. Good timing, she replied, but the mothership would notice. They rushed back inside. Kale wrapped Leary in a thick blanket and placed her in a small storage pod lined with foam. If anything happens, he said to Soraya, take her and run to the canyon. I'm not leaving you, she replied. Kale placed a hand on her shoulder. Then let's make them regret coming. Outside engines roared above the ridge. Soraya whispered to her sleeping child. They'll come for us, yes. They'll find us ready. Kale tightened his grip on the door panel. This time he wasn't alone, and this time they were a family. Worth fighting for? Asterisk, the first blast came without warning. It tore through the night sky like lightning, shaking the ground and lighting up the inside of the hauler with a blinding red glow. Metal panels rattled. The lights flickered. Leary woke up screaming again. Kale was already on his feet. They found us. Outside, a sleek black hunter ship hovered low, its engines growling like a wild beast. Twin gun ports glowed on both sides, and a thin beam scanned across the terrain. Cutting through rocks and metal piles like a knife through paper, Soraya grabbed Leary and held her tight. The child wrapped her arms around her neck and wouldn't let go. Cale slammed the panel shut. The shield nets down. They're coming fast. Another blast hit the ridge, throwing up a wave of dust and fire. Soraya looked through the cracked window, her voice firm. We run. Now, no, Cale growled. We lead them away. I'll stay. She turned to him sharply. No one stays. Not this time. Outside, shapes began to move, black armored figures, tall and silent, spreading out in a hunting pattern. Their eyes glowed red behind glass masks. They weren't just mercenaries. These were driven enforcers, cold, exact, and ruthless. Cale activated his emergency control board. I've got 6 traps left. If I time them right, we can cut off their left flank. Soraya nodded. I'll carry Leary. You lead. Cale opened the side hatch and cold wind rushed in. The desert night was alive with smoke and sirens. He took one step, then paused, looked back at the ship. He whispered, Please hold, girl. Just a few more hours. Then they ran. They moved fast over rocky ground, weaving through junk piles and metal bones of dead ships. Leary clung to Soraya like a backpack, her face buried against her mother's shoulder. Cale stayed ahead, tossing scrap behind him to mark the path for the enemy. When the first enforcer stepped into range, Cale triggered a sonic mine. It exploded in a flash of white light, sending the armored figure flying back against the rocks. No scream, just silence, and then 2 more stepped forward. They don't stop, Cale muttered. Soraya climbed up behind him. Keep moving, the canyon's ahead. A blast hit the ground near them. The sand burned. Cale pulled Soraya into a narrow gap between jagged walls. He tapped the final trigger. Another trap went off, this one sending shrapnel everywhere. The sound made Leary cry harder. Soraya held her close, whispering something in her language, a soft chant, maybe a lullaby, maybe a prayer. But it steadied the girl. Then something unexpected happened. A voice called out from the sky deep, mechanical, amplified. Return the property, and you may leave unharmed. Cale laughed darkly. They still think this is a transaction. Eyes flashed. We are not property. Cale looked at her, then at Leary. Then let's prove it. They reached the canyon's edge. Below was a dried-up riverbed with narrow walls on both sides. It would slow the enemy's movement, but it also meant a trap for them too, if caught. Cale pointed ahead. We go down. I'll seal the top with a blast. They'll think we fell. Soraya jumped first, cradling Leary. Cale followed. Rocks shifted beneath their boots. Dust rose thick around them. Cale pulled out his last thermal grenade and wedged it under a boulder at the canyon's mouth, looked up at the stars one last time, then pressed the switch. The explosion echoed across the desert. Rocks collapsed behind them, sealing the entrance. Silence returned. In the darkness, Cale sat down, breathing hard. Soraya gently placed Leary beside him, wrapped in her arms. She's shaking, Soraya said. So am I, Cale replied. They waited for footsteps, lasers, more drones. But none came. For now, they were safe. Cale looked at Soraya. She had dirt on her cheeks, cuts on her arms, and fire in her eyes. You didn't run, he said. She shook her head. You gave us something we hadn't had in years. What? She looked at Leary, then at him. Hope. Cale leaned his head back against the stone wall and closed his eyes. The fire had fallen from the sky, but it hadn't taken them. Not yet. They were still breathing, and that meant the fight wasn't over. Not for Leary. Not for Soraya. Not for the human who chose to protect them when he could have walked away. The food pack landed at Cale's feet with a soft thud. He looked up and saw the man who had thrown it. Tall, polished boots, golden cloak draped over his black uniform, symbol on his chest house, Drevin. You look like you've been through hell, the man said, smiling like he was offering kindness. Eat, talk. Maybe even make a deal. Cale didn't pick up the food. He stood in front of Soraya and Leary, shielding them with his body. Soraya's voice was a cold whisper. That man. Oh, he's not just a messenger. He's their buyer.
Teals!
Eyes narrowed. You mean he buys people? The man stepped closer, hands raised as if in peace. Let's not pretend this is something ugly. You saved something valuable. I'm here to reward you. Kale didn't blink. They're not things. The man chuckled. Of course they're family to you now, I'm sure. The girl even calls you Papa. How sweet. Kale's jaw tightened. The man took out a small orb and tapped it. A floating screen appeared, displaying Kale's face, ship ID, and recent transactions. You're not rich, Kale. You trade bolts and scrap. You live on repairs and luck. I'm offering you a new life, a contract, a home on any planet you want. Credits beyond your dreams. He stepped closer, voice lower. Just give them back. No chains, no violence. Just return what doesn't belong to you, Soraya. Took a step forward. Leary held onto her leg. Kale didn't move. Let me show. You something, the man said, his smile still frozen in place. He turned the orb again, and a hologram played. A group of aliens, weak and silent, lined up in a glass room. A guard tossed food into the center. One mother crawled forward, got it, and fed her child. Soraya's breath caught in her throat. That's one of their holding stations. Turn to her. You recognize it? She nodded, eyes wide with horror. That's where I was supposed to be sent after the crate. The man ended the hologram and gave a casual shrug. Better there than being hunted. At least it's clean. Kale's fingers twitched at his side. He stepped forward, slow and steady, until he stood just a meter from the man. You really think I'd hand him to you? The man didn't flinch. I think everyone breaks when the numbers are high enough. Kale looked back at Soraya and Leary. The girl had a tear on her cheek, but didn't cry. She just held her mother tighter. He turned back. You're wrong, Kale said. Some things can't be bought. And with that, he pulled the pulse blaster from his back and aimed it straight at the man's orb. One shot, the orb exploded in sparks. The man's smile vanished. You just refused Hausdreven, he said, stepping back. Kale raised his voice. And I'll keep refusing until you stop treating people like tools. The man pointed behind him. 4 armored guards stepped into view, but they didn't attack. They were waiting for orders. Soraya stepped beside Kale, holding a metal rod. Her posture calm and ready. You want us? You'll bleed for it, Kale added, and we'll make sure you remember us. The man stared for a moment, then gave a sharp whistle. The guard stepped back. This isn't over, he said. You've made an enemy of the guild. I hope your patchwork ship can outrun that. Kale replied, we don't need to run. We'll survive. The man left without another word. His ship rose into the air and vanished into the clouds. Kale let out a long breath. His heart was pounding. He turned to Soraya. I'm sorry. I should have seen it coming. But Soraya stepped closer, placed a hand on his chest, and said, You didn't run. That's all that matters. Leary looked up at Kale and quietly said, You're really our papa now. Kale knelt and smiled. If you'll let me be. Leary nodded. Mama already picked you. Soraya blushed and looked away but didn't deny it. That night they repaired the ship in silence. Kale upgraded the engine core. Soraya secured their old ID tags and began rewriting their digital names. Leary helped by handing over tools and humming softly. When the stars returned, Kale sat outside and looked up. The universe was still dangerous, still cruel, but for once, he didn't feel alone in it. And when Soraya came out, sat beside him, and rested her head lightly on his shoulder. Kale knew he didn't save them. They saved him too. Leary laughed. It was the first time Kale had ever heard the sound. Not a giggle, not a quiet chuckle, a full, loud belly laugh that echoed through the dusty morning air as she chased a wind-blown leaf across the dirt field behind the hauler. Kale stood frozen by the door, a wrench in his hand, engine half open behind him. That laugh struck him harder than any blaster ever could. Soraya stepped beside him, her silver hair tied back with a copper thread. She was holding a basket of scavenged fruit. Her eyes were fixed on her daughter. She hasn't laughed like that since Varric died, she whispered. Kale looked at her. She sounds alive. She is. They had landed on a forgotten moon, far from any major trade routes. Just mountains, red dirt, and silence. No guild ships, no drones, no cities. Just space to breathe. Kale had repaired the hauler into a new shape, not for flight but for living. Solar panels stretched over the roof. Inside, he'd built small rooms with soft walls, real blankets, even a cooking unit. Soraya had cleaned every surface with her bare hands and arranged the little space with quiet care. Leary now had a soft place to sleep, a real pillow. Worn teddy bear Kale had found in his old chest. This wasn't a hiding place anymore. It was a home. But something else was growing too. Kale saw it in the way. Leary reached for his hand whenever they walked the rocky trails. In the way Soraya smiled when he made her laugh with dumb stories. In the way his chest tightened every time he saw them resting safely near him. He hadn't just saved them. He was becoming part of them, and it scared him. That evening, as they shared a small meal around a flickering heater, Soraya spoke. I want to change our names. Kale raised an eyebrow. To what? Something new, something not hunted. Leary looked up, curious. Like what, Mama? Soraya smiled. We'll think of one together. Oh. Kale stared into his cup of warm tea. You don't have to stay. Here, you could find a real colony, a place with schools, food, doctors. Soraya reached over and touched his hand. Shh. We found what we needed. Kale's throat felt dry. You needed safety. And we found it, she said softly. Shh. In. Leary stood up suddenly. Can I draw us? Kale blinked. Draw. Leary nodded and ran to get her little board. She came back and began sketching. 3 figures holding hands under a dome house. 2 suns above them and a glowing tree near the side. That's you, she said. Pointing to the tallest figure, Kale didn't speak because he didn't know how to describe what he felt. Later that night, while Soraya put Leary to bed, Kale sat alone outside under the stars. His mind raced with doubts. He was just a trader. A man who lived in junkyards and repaired broken engines. What right did he have to be a father, a protector, a partner? Then Soraya stepped out quietly and sat beside him. You're overthinking, she said. Kalea gave a small laugh. Always. She didn't speak for a moment. Then she whispered, I watched you from the crate. Even before you opened it, you hesitated. You felt us.
Ow.
I knew then we weren't just weight to you. Kale stared at the stars. I've never had a family. Not really. Soraya looked at him. And maybe this is your first. Before Kale could reply, a soft ping came from the signal box. He rushed over, checked the display, and cursed under his breath. What is it? Soraya asked. A listening beacon, Kale said. Hidden close, Guild? He nodded. Could be. Someone's trying to find us. How long? Kale scanned further. Maybe a day. Maybe hours. Soraya stepped closer. We have to go. Kale didn't move. We just made this place a home, but we're not safe. Kale looked at the drawing Leary made, still resting on the table. Her little hands had colored him with a blue shirt, just like the one he wore now. And he was smiling in it. Not a fighter, a father. He turned to Soraya. We don't run this time. Soraya stared at him. What do you mean? We erase the beacon. We clean our trail. We make it so no one finds us again. That's dangerous. So is living, Kale replied. But I want to live this time, not just survive. Soraya stepped close. We do this together, Kale nodded. Together. They stood under the twin moons, 2 survivors who never asked to meet. Now bound by something stronger than fear. Not blood, not duty, but choice. The official looked up from the dusty console, confused. Name of applicant? Kale stood tall in the middle of the old outpost registration hall, his hands slightly dirty from travel, his voice steady. Kale Moran. The officer nodded and tapped a few keys. And your family name? Kale turned to look behind him. Soraya stood there in silence, one hand resting gently on Leary's shoulder. The girl wore a faded brown cloak that Cale had sewn himself. Her eyes were wide, curious, glowing just slightly like the dusk light falling. "Through the cracked windows, they'll carry my name," Cale said. The officer paused. "You're registering them as—" Cale didn't blink. "My daughter and my wife." The man behind the desk raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Outpost didn't belong to any guild. It was neutral, space-forgotten, far unpolized. What people chose to call each other out here wasn't his business. He stamped the record file. "Done," he muttered. That was it. Simple, quiet, but in Cale's heart, something thundered louder than any warship as they walked out of the building. Leary tugged at his sleeve. "Does this mean I'm really yours now?" Cale knelt beside her. "You've always been mine." Soraya didn't speak, but her hand found his. She held it tight. The next few days moved quickly. They erased every digital trace of Soraya and Leary's old identities. Cale rewired his ship's signature codes. He swapped the old ID beacon with a blank signal and embedded a family code that marked the hauler. It's not as a cargo freighter, but a homestead unit, a family ship. He replaced the Dreven crate where Soraya and Leary had once been locked with a small storage room filled with blankets, books, and little tools for Leary to play with. They painted the outside hull with fresh colors, soft rust, orange, and sky blue. On the side, Soraya added 3 simple lines interlocked, one thick. "One medium, one small. U.S.," she said. One evening, as they set up a campfire near a quiet lake, Soraya prepared a dish from her people's old recipe stew made from wild roots and flame-cooked grain. Cale took a bite, chewed slowly, then smiled. "It tastes like something worth staying alive for." Soraya chuckled softly. "It's the salt and a little hope." Leary jumped into Cale's lap and held up a woven bracelet she had made from dried grass. "This is your father bracelet," she said. "Mama helped." Cale took it carefully and wore it around his wrist like a priceless treasure. That night, after Leary fell asleep by the fire, Soraya and Cale sat side by side. Soraya's voice was soft. "When I lost Varric, I thought that was the end of everything. My strength, my hope, my reason to breathe." Cale didn't interrupt. "But you," she continued, "you gave me something I never expected. You didn't just protect us. You gave us yourself." Cale looked at her, unsure what to say. "You gave us your name," she said again. "That means more than protection. It means belonging." Cale's voice cracked a little. "You saved me too, Soraya. I wasn't living before. I was floating, fixing junk, sleeping in silence, trading coins for parts. Now I feel something real." She leaned against his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her gently. "Do you regret it?" she whispered. "Not for a second." Peace didn't last forever. One morning, Cale spotted a glimmer in the sky, a Draven scout ship, far off, searching, scanning. But it didn't stop. It didn't find them. The trails had been erased too well, and the stars were full of places to hide. Cale knew the danger would always be out there, but now, he wasn't running. He was defending something that mattered, someone to someone's months. Past their small farm grew vegetables under heat lamps, water from the recycled mist tanks, walls patched together from old ship steel. Cale built Leary her own workbench beside his. She learned to fix wires. Soraya built a signal jammer, better than any Cale had ever seen. She laughed when it worked on the first try. He kissed her on the forehead at night. They sat together reading stories by lantern light, Earth tales, Datari legends. Leary mixed the names and made her own. Once upon a time, she said, there was a mama with a silver heart, a papa with hands of fire, and a girl who flew higher than the sky. Cale smiled. It sounds familiar. Soraya brushed Leary's hair with gentle fingers. That sounds like us. And as the stars blinked above them, Cale knew he had found more than safety, more than freedom. He had found his family and given them his name.